Can you hear me? On the Zoom, because I know that in the room you can hear me. But on the Zoom, can you hear me? No? Maybe I'm muted. Oh, okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay. Move slightly here. And hello, I'm Dr. Juarez. I'm the Director of Science and Mathematics. So good afternoon, everybody. And welcome to the second day of CQ-AState in Campus Querétaro. Thank you very much for being here. So today our speakers are going to address topics in chemistry, biotechnology, and the biological sciences. The topics are going to range from the properties of commercial products to treatment of cancer. So I would like to take a moment to thank our judges today. Thank you for your time, for your disposition, and from your expertise. I would also like to thank our organizers, in particular our chair, Dr. Kathy. And let's welcome our speakers with a big round of applause. Okay, so hello guys, welcome to the second day of CREATE. Just a reminder for the judges, a presentation was sent out to you guys this morning on email that has the QR code to grade each presentation. We're gonna have the award ceremony tomorrow at 4 o'clock, so please have the grades ready by then in order to give the award ceremony. If you guys could have it by tonight, that would be perfect. You guys could grade after each presentation or at the end of the day, it's perfectly fine. So without further ado, we're gonna welcome Yolanda for our first oral presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Yolanda. I'm from Biological Sciences, and I'm going to be speaking about cervical cancer and cancer antigen 125. So for the cancer antigen 125, I am going to be going into a more specific type of cervical cancer, which is adenocarcinoma. So a little overview of what is cancer. It's a disease where cells grow uncontrollably. They can spread to other body parts. They have a certain characteristics to help for their survival, which I will talk about further on. And it is considered a genetic disease. However, some still don't consider it one. So cervical cancer is a cancer that affects the cells of the cervix. So it's the neck that connects the uterus and the vagina. It is the fourth most common type of cancer in women. However, in developing countries, it is number 1. It is usually diagnosed in the 5th decade of life, so 40, 49, but it can be diagnosed earlier. And there are 4 stages, 1, 2, and 3, 4. And in those stages, there are more subdivisions, and it's divided by how big of the tumor is, where exactly it is, and the causes. So our bodies, they function in a very interesting way. Some functions we don't even control, the body does. So it's almost like it's following rules, you know, to go to, you have to complete step 1 and then step 2 and step 3, but you have to do it right. but it's not perfect. So some errors do happen. So it's just normal regular mutations that just happen to survive. HPV infection, which is a human papillomavirus, which is the most common cause of cervical cancer. You have genital warts, sexually active at a young age, which is 16 and younger. And that is because it is connected with the HPV infection, as well as women at a young age are not fully developed. So it can cause lesions that can in the future come cervical cancer, and having several sexual partners, which is again connected to HPV. So HPV and cervical cancer has been established and is well known since 1996. It is one of the most common sexually transmitted diseases. It's not one where you can see changes in your body. You have to get tested for it to show up. Usually, in most cases, your body's immune system will fight it off and nothing will happen. However, there are some independent factors that contribute to cervical cancer, such as if your cell's immune system, you have a condition where there is no cell-mediated immunity, it will increase your chances. There are over 100 types of HPV. 15 are known to be cancerous, and they are divided into low risk and high risk. So high risk for cervical cancer are type 16 and 18. Some low risk are known to cause cervical cancer, but it's usually the high risk one. So it causes 70% of cervical cancer. It did range some from 50 up to 95%. And it affects squamous cells, which is cervical carcinoma, or it can affect the gland cells, which is the adenocarcinoma. So for the viruses to replicate, they do depend on the host. So what they do is they will invade our cells. And like I said, they have certain characteristics to help in their survival. So some of them are the protein oncogene E6 and E7, which will inhibit the cell cycle. And well, the E6, it binds to the tumor suppressor, which is P53, and it will stop the DNA repair. It will stop apoptosis. And the E7, which binds to the retinoblastoma RB, which elaborates the cellular transcription factor E1. So what we have at the end is a cell that has become immortal and will keep on dividing no matter if the DNA is damaged or not. And this is exactly what is cancer. So this is the main cause of what HPV causes cancer. So adenocarcinoma is estimated of carcinoma 20%. It is becoming more common. However, it's still not very common. It's one rare cancer. It is more common in young women, and it is a very aggressive cancer with a low survival rate. Because this type of cancer can spread to the lymph nodes, the peritoneum, which is the bag that holds all the organs together, and it can also invade the tissue of the organs. Surgery is not an option because we still don't have technology to achieve those, as well as because some patients have gone through chemotherapy and radiation, their bodies would not withstand the surgery, so it's not an option. So this is where the Ca125 comes in. So the cancer antigen 125, it has the first one of the studies that was done. It was done over 20 years. It's mostly used for ovarian cancer, but it works for specifically adenocarcinoma. So it's a tumor marker, and there's molecular matter that are produced by the tumor cells or in response of tumor cells. So what it does is it's a blood test. So it will, once the test is done and comes back, if there are levels of it, it will indicate that there is cancer present. So it does help for the diagnostic, as well as when patients are done with radiation and chemotherapy. It does help monitor, especially when it comes to patients with adenocarcinoma, because for adenocarcinoma, there is no chemotherapy that will cure it. I mean, once someone is declared cancer-free, there's always that percent of 50 of it coming back or not coming back. And for adenocarcinoma, what happens is a patient will go through a chemotherapy, and since it's aggressive, the cancer will spread. So then you will have to go to another chemotherapy, until it just stops. So all it does is expand the lifetime of the person, and it also helps with dictating the survival rate of the person. So treatment options. So we have for the first stage is surgery, radiation, and or chemotherapy. And for the last is chemotherapy and radiation. For the last stages, because they are more invasive stages where the tumors are bigger, surgery is not an option, because if the surgery cuts the tumor wrong, it will cause them metastasize, so it does allow the cancer cells to move. There is also internal radiation. So here it's radiation, and the internal one is where the machine is actually put inside of the person. So for 1 to 3 days, depending on what is said. And they are very aggressive treatments, though they have helped progress the cancer treatments. They do affect the body in ways where the body will not be able to recover, or eventually will need more help. So some of the side effects for radiation are sterilization, feeling tiredness, changes to the skin, damage to the lymph nodes. And for chemotherapy, because it does kill any fast-growing cell, it's loss of hair, pain, loss of appetite, changes on the immune system. So it does make a person eventually not be able to produce white blood cells or red blood cells, so it does something in the future. So statistically, worldwide, it's estimated that 600 women were diagnosed in 2020, and of those, 342,000 died. 342,000 died. HPV does increase the chance of 6% of developing cervical cancer. In Mexico, yearly, it was estimated that 9,539 were diagnosed, and of those, 4,335 women died. And the graph here shows that when you are infected with HPV, it does not happen within 5 years. It is a very slow progression. So between 15 years, that's a little less, you will have the precancer cells, and after the 15 years, you will have the cancer cells. And this is where the CQ-125 comes into play, as well as early diagnostic, because early diagnostic really, it plays a very important role on the survival rate, on what treatments a person will have to go, if there's surgery, if there will be permanent changes to the body. So prevention. So it is delaying the first sex activity at older ages. It is getting the HPV vaccine, which you can get it by the time you're 25, and getting screenings. Because of right now, for adenocarcinoma, for example, there has not been any new treatment to help, and that's between 5 to 6 years. So it does take a while for treatment to come back. There was one that came in the fall of 2021 that was approved by the FDA, but it was just beginning to be tested on people with cervical cancer. If anybody has any questions. Yes. Well, it would have to be like a deeper test to know exactly which one. But for the adenocarcinoma, it was about 30 milliliters, if I'm correct, and that's detected if a cancer was present. but one is very important. It also depends on the person, on their immune system. But I don't think it would change the diagnosis. It's just like an average of how long it takes the HPV to cause cervical cancer, because it is so progressing. Mhm. Mhm. I think it's important to promote it. I myself did not know about it until I started doing more research. And when I researched it, Mexico does offer it. I don't recall exactly the prices, but a government hospital was very low compared to going to a private doctor. But it is available in Mexico. No. It should be something that is promoted. It's something that even worldwide in the United States, it's something that is it's lacking of. It's not something that is it's very out known. But yes, it is something that should be known, especially in schools, because people are being sexually active, and at that time they're already putting themselves at risk, because it's from ages from 18 to 30 for women. I read that it was up to 25 years old. I didn't read exactly why, because it caught my attention to look for the price, but from what I researched, 25 is where you get it, not later on. I would say lack of information. Mhm. Well, the one that I focused on the research, it was actually done over 20 years ago, because it's not something that is very commonly used. But you have the person already diagnosed with the cancer, so they would do the blood test, and then they would almost go by, I would say, percentages. I know, like 90, and by how much was present. So if there was a lot of it, then it would detect well, it means that there's cancer present. It was a blood test. I'm gonna have to get back to you, Professor. Any questions? People from Zoom?
No, no, no.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So yet again, thank you so much for such an amazing presentation. It was extremely informative, if you ask me. So up next, we have a presentation from the Department of Chemistry. Specifically speaking, our speaker is Julio Cesar Mata Mendieta. The title of the presentation itself is The Optimization of the Synthesis of Curcuminoids for Cancer Treatment as a Potential Photosynthesizer. Please, Julio, take it away.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Cesar Mata Mendieta, and I will present the optimization of synthesis of curcuminoids for cancer treatment as potential photosynthesizers. Louder? Okay. Yeah, so, sorry. I mean, for the face mask. So, before going into the presentation and going into all chemical reactions and chemical compounds, I will try to ask you a question. Have anyone tried curry, the dish? Is anyone? Woo, I love curry as well. So from curry, one of the main components or recipes that we have, the species that the spice that we find in curry, it is actually turmeric. And from turmeric, it is extracted from a root called curcuma longa. And within this spice, we found our chemical of interest called curcumin, which is this chemical compound. But what makes curcumin so special within this project? So is its application in medicinal applications from photodynamic therapy or PDT. PDT, it is a modern and minimally invasive therapy that actually treats several cancers, but specifically skin cancer. It is composed from mainly two components, a source of light and a photosynthesizing agent, or for short, PS. So curcumin is one of the most studied molecules within these photosynthesizing agent roles, but it actually has a very low bioavailability, which can be translated as a poor absorption and a high rate of elimination through our body. So within this project, we aim to modify the original structure of curcumin and by maintaining its therapeutic effects. So these ones are the aldehydes or chemical compounds that we try to synthesize the curcumin-like molecules known as curcuminoids. As you can see, each one of them has different characteristics from each other, from going from nitrogen or sulfur or even a halogen known as bromine. We then have two sets of conditions in which we develop the synthesis of these curcuminoids. One of them, it was the acid conditions, the acid condition for the formation of these curcuminoids. First of all, we use acetic acid and hydrochloric solution in order to promote the synthesis of these specific curcuminoids. And then we use sodium carbonate in order to adjust the pH of this reaction and separate it through an organic and an active phase. Then we study each one of them, the active and the organic phase, in order to see if we have the desired product. As you can see in this thin layer chromatography picture, we then we compare from the original substrate, which are acetylacetone and the aldehyde. These ones are those two, and we have the active and the organic phase. They are very similar within the range that they run within the thin layer chromatography. So then we discuss that the product actually has reaction characteristics. So we have an incomplete reaction. Then, if acid didn't work, then we then focus on basic conditions. Within basic conditions, we use 50% sodium hydroxide or NaOH solution in order to promote the synthesis of these curcuminants. Within these conditions, we managed to find within the same reaction, but we now have a total amount that we synthesize for 1.50 grams of this actual curcuminant, as you can see within this picture. It also resembles a 37.8% of the total yield. And I must highlight that the time of this curcuminant, that the reaction time, it is up to 20 hours. It took a very long time in order to synthesize this specific molecule. Now, within the same basic conditions, we managed to also synthesize 3 more curcuminants with 20.7%, 25.7%, and 35.8%. You can see that none of these curcuminants have ever surpassed the 50% variance of yield. So actually, we have a very poor yield within these basic conditions. And we aim to get a higher yield. But, can you get that? But we actually developed a new, we actually developed a synthetical pathway in order to follow for us that suits our conditions here in campus. So now, how can we be certain that we actually have the curcuminants or the desired product? When we have 4 main characterization techniques, which involve thin layer chromatography comparing with the original substrate, a melting point in order to determine the actual temperature in which it melts, and I will focus then on absorbance spectrometry and attenuated total refraction, or ATR. For absorbance spectrophotometry, then we can determine the actual wavelength at which the curcuminant will absorb light, at which stage of the spectra it is located, and also the specific state that actually curcuminants will have depending on the original form of curcumin, taking as reference the original form of curcumin. For attenuated total refraction, then, we took advantage of the molecule ability to absorb radiation and allow for its bonds or functional groups to vibrate and give a specific characteristic for that molecule. So here is the characterization process that we have done for this specific molecule. As you can see, these are the experimental and calculated absorbance spectra. This one is the experimental one that we got, and this one is the calculated one against the original one, which is for curcumin. You can see that each of them has similar shapes within the spectra, following the same path. And also they have a similar wavelength. According to this one, it is 403, and these are 423 nanometers within this wavelength. So they resemble a little bit from the wavelength. And for the ATR, it was run in Centro de Física Aplicada y Tecnología Avanzada in Cibatá here in Querétaro. That actually we will just focus mainly in 2 components of this graph. These components, or these tiny peaks, that we can depict it as the carbonyl compounds or the oxygen species that fit in our molecules. And this part from the infrared that we have can be attributed to the ring part or ring component of our molecule. It is like a puzzle, like this part that you can see some part of the molecule, like you can just attach it to each one of the molecules to see if you can have the actual molecule. But now this is, I will call this presentation the revenge of acid conditions as well. Because acid conditions will not go without a fight. Again, we use acid conditions but now with the help of 2 catalyzers, which are boron trioxide and 1,2,3,4 tetrahydroquinone. These catalyzers then promote the addition of these the curcuminoid, and we actually put it within acid water in order to promote the precipitation for phosphoric acid. I must highlight that also this was a faster reaction that it took us up to 8 hours, which is 3 times less than the original basic conditions that we have. And it also gives us a 64.9% of yield, which actually have double the yield from our previously discussed conditions. So, so here is the comparison between both methods. You can see that with the previous method, basic conditions, we don't resemble the original state that we have for curcumin, and also the melting point was not able to be determined as we took the sample up to 200 Celsius and it did not melt. For instance, with this new synthesis pathway, we were able to have a better state actually resemble the original the pathway within the curcumin analysis. And the melting point, it was also determined to be 173 to 175, according to the literature that we have a reference point. The reference melting point is exactly the same. And you can see actually is the brown compared to the new one that is orange. So now, giving a new perspective for this project, we also use a computational approach. For instance, we use one of our synthesized curcuminoids in order to have our computational calculations. We then optimize the molecular structure, and then we were able to predict the absorbance wavelength within the computer analysis. This is one of the curcuminoids in 3D structures that we can see in the computer, and this is the actual input from the computer that we can run here in campus. So this was the curcuminoid that we also synthesized and compared with computational analysis. We also use acid and basic conditions, but with the new method, acid conditions did not. We were not able to isolate the actual products of these curcuminoids. But within basic, we were able to have a 59.2%. So now we will have the computational and experimental results against each other. So then, as well as you can see here in the curcuminoids, in the curcumin absorbance spectra, it did not resemble the original state that curcumin has been presented from the previous mentioned absorbance spectra. And also the wavelength is very different from what we have. But now looking at the computational analysis that we have, you can actually see that the highest peak, it is located on the 360 nanometers around. So what we have here on this side, it is that our spectrophotometer, it has a limit of 400. So we cannot not see this before the spectrophotometer. But what we can actually see, it is the scale that is remaining for the 400 up to this point. And you can see that they resemble almost the same shape of going through downwards. As for future work for this project, I would like to invite my peers of biology, biotech, or chemistry in order to have the biological activity within these species of curcuminoids, as we can determine its therapeutical effects. Then future characterization as well, we need to determine the actual structure of these curcuminoids by using NMR or any other technique for identification of molecules. Also, the synthesis of new curcuminoids, as we can expand this library not just for 4 or 5, we can even have more of them using different approaches under computational analysis. And then I want to thank the university for using the laboratory space, giving us all the material possible for this project, and Centro de Física Aplicada y Tecnología Avanzada, CIFATA, in order to use the installation, as well as Doctora Maria Antonieta Mondragon, which was the one that helped us through the characterization of this molecule. and also my classmates and now friends for giving us the time and for this project to be possible. That will be all. Questions? Sure. Mhm. Mhm. For the PDC therapy, in order to these molecules to have the active site, but literature suggested that these molecules actually have a specific, using the specific wavelength that they have, they promote it from a ground state to an excited state, and then they through with the interaction of oxygen creating a reactive oxygen species, they go and through the radicalization, the oxygen can intervene within these malignant tumors. Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, localization, and then also one of the effects that we want in this actual curcumin facilities that bind to or excited to a specific way that in order to be applied in the body. Thank you. Mhm, mhm. Sure. Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think it is I think it is because of its wavelength. I think it's for 428 or 23 nanometers, more or less. I think it's one of the most interesting properties for curcumin for the therapeutical effect. And also I think it is basic, very good molecule in order to promote this therapeutical effect. But as I mentioned, it is we need a lot of these curcumin in order, a lot of amount of this curcumin in order to have this therapeutic effect. As it enters our body, it will just eliminate it, being a natural process. Mhm. 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 Exactly. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, 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 we didn't go there. Most of them because of lack of time. I'm sorry, but it was lack of time that we couldn't develop the biology part, and also it involves a lot of things through the biology activity. So it is really good to. It will be really good for me to actually see the actual therapeutic effect within these continuums that we have been synthesizing. Yeah, that was a cosa. That's very well. We hope. Sure. Mhm. 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 Well, I have for some, first of all, I think maybe optimizing the actual recipe that we have developed. I mean, we have up to 60% of yield, but I think we can manage even to have at least 80 or 90%. I think it's one of the strategies I would suggest for my peers. Um, and then maybe trying a lot of different aldehydes. Maybe there's a different also approach or molecules that can be attacked even with I don't know, like pharmacological things like diclofenac or something like that. That it can be actually very interesting regarding the curcumin synthesis.
Oh my God, the worst question for you. I'm sorry. Okay, we have a complaint because they cannot hear the questions because the microphone is too far away. So let's keep it in mind for next talk. And then there is a question. Have you analyzed the biocompatibility of the new synthesized curcumin molecules? No, we haven't.
No, we haven't. So we just have developed the synthetical pathway, but that is a future work that we actually it is being working now. That I have been talked to.
And in South Cataract, the production seem to be an MRC.
Absolutely, yes.
As soon as we
Absolutely, as
have
soon as we
access.
have access to it.
Have you checked the UV data with the titration? Do you think there are different from those?
Yeah, we have checked it, and also backing up our expected, we have the calculated ones from the computer, and they actually resemble some sort of degree. And we also, but we aim to have a more specific characterization processes that the previously mentioned person.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Julio. Sorry.
Okay, Julio, thank you. Now we would like to welcome Atali Ventura from also chemistry, and she'll be presenting photodynamic therapy for the treatment of thyroid cancer. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Natalia Ventura, and I'm gonna present to you photodynamic therapy for the treatment of thyroid cancer. Okay. So first of all, photodynamic therapy is a not too new concept. Was actually initiated in 1898 by Oscar Rath. It's a minimal invasive procedure and is relatively painless. It has the principal uses that it has given was oncogenic treatment, principally skin cancer, but also has been found to have immunotherapy uses and antimicrobial uses. It involves the excitation of a photosynthesizer, this is a molecule, with a light of a specific wavelength. This photosynthesizer has the ability to, when excited, then produce reactive oxygen species. Examples of these reactive oxygen species are superoxide radical, hydroxyl radical, hydrogen peroxide, and Ziegler oxygen. As you may know, these reactive oxygen species have cytotoxic effects in the cells. An example of an example of a photosensitizer that is currently in use is aminolevulinic acid, or ALA, and is used for actinic keratosis in the face and scalp, exciting it with blue light. One of the compounds that is studied for photodynamic therapy is curcumin. These compounds come from the plants of the species Curcuma longa. An example is turmeric, in Spanish curcuma. As mentioned before, the rhizome of this plant is used in food preparations, especially Indian food. It's known for having antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity. And it actually, some say that it helps improve the symptoms of depression and arthritis. The curcumin, that is a principal chemical compound, comes from the rhizome of the plant, and it's a symmetrical polyphenol. It's highly conjugated. That means it has various P systems linked together. This is why it is promising photosensitizer for photodynamic therapy. And it can exist in both the keto and enol form, with the enol being found to be more reactive. As my classmates mentioned before, curcumin is not so doesn't have good bioavailability. So synthesis of a derivative with a special group that can help improve the solubility and bioavailability is wanted. And for this, literature has shown that the addition of dimethylpropionic acid and diclofenac helps with the water solubility and bioavailability of the molecule, expecting to keep also the activity for the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity. Actually, literature shows that dimethylpropionic acid, the addition of dimethylpropionic acid, improves the antioxidant activity of the molecule. And we aim also to increase reactivity. So to use photodynamic therapy for thyroid cancer, it's important to say that thyroid cancer is the 5.7% of the new cases of cancer in Mexico. It is the abnormal growth of cells in the thyroid gland. This can be seen like a lump in your neck. Thyroid cancer usually do not affect the production of the hormones that the thyroid gland does, well, the proper function, but the volume of the tumor can make swallowing and breathing difficult, so that's pretty dangerous. The normal way to go about treating thyroid cancer is surgery, but well, the resection of parts of all the thyroid glands, as you can imagine, brings long and short-term side effects because of the hormone imbalance. And there's already studies that show positive results in the treatment of papillary thyroid cancer using photodynamic therapy. So the target molecule that we study about for the treatment of thyroid cancer using photodynamic therapy is a protein that's called BAX3. This protein is part of the BCL2 protein family. This BCL2 family is actually characterized because it promotes or inhibits apoptosis of the cell. And BAC3 has been found in thyroid cancer cells to help the cell survive, so no correct apoptosis happens. In a normal cell, the BAC3 protein should only be coded for when the cell is in stressful conditions. So it can help the cell survive the stressful conditions. But in cancer, this protein is more encoded, and it gives the appropriate apoptosis. It works by binding to what is called the HSP70 protein. This is the 70 kilodalton heat shock protein. Normally, this HSP70 protein binds to another protein that's called BAC1, and it takes misfolded or non-functional protein to be degraded in the proteasome. But BAC3 competes with BAC1 in the binding with HSP70 and prevents the degradation of the protein. So targeting BAC3 could be a way to go about the anti-cancer treatment. The tools that we used for this study was molecular docking. This molecular docking is a computational method to predict the binding between a ligand that would be our curcumin derivative and a protein. The protein, you have to know the 3D structure of the protein for this to be useful. And it just uses classical physics. It just sees the interaction between charges. For example, hydrophobic interactions, H bonds, etc. On the other hand, we also use density functional theory, or DFT. This tries to predict the ground state of a molecule, trying to solve the Schrodinger equation. It's done by an approximation called the Born-Oppenheimer approximation. This takes into consideration that the difference in masses between the nuclei and the electrons of an atom. So because the nuclei is way bigger than the electron, it takes the nuclei as a static particle, while the electron is the only one moving. And that's how it calculates the approximation. So it works with the wave functions of the nuclei and the electrons separately. Okay. So the objective of this study was to propose a curcumin derivative that contains diclofenac and dimethylopropionic acid for bioavailability for the possible treatment of thyroid cancer using photodynamic therapy. So for the molecular docking of the protein BAC3 and the curcumin derivative 1P with 3 rotations in all the single bonds, we obtain a binding energy of minus 7.15 kilocalories per mole. This is good, and it's exothermic, so we aim for that. And we got also an inhibition constant, that is the concentration needed to produce the half maximum inhibition. And for that, we got a 7.71 millimolar. That's a low inhibition. We also aim to have as low as possible. Okay. For the DFT, the 2 main things we got from the DFT was the energy of the HOMO and LUMO orbital. So the HOMO is the highest occupied molecular orbital, and the LUMO the lowest unoccupied molecular orbital. And with that, we calculated the HOMO and LUMO gap. That is the first one, the HL gap. This is the difference between these 2 orbitals. So it can give us information about how much energy we have to put the system to make 1 electron jump from the HOMO to the LUMO. And we also, with this information, we calculate an approximation of the mu, that is chemical potential, And this represents how easily, or the ability the molecule has to exchange electron density with its surroundings. We also calculated eta, that is chemical hardness. That is like the opposite, the resistance of the molecule to exchange electron density with its surroundings, and electrophilicity index, that is omega. And this measures more or less the electron acceptor affinity to gain additional electronic charge. We did this definition and the results we got. We wanted to have the HL gap the smallest. So comparing between the curcumin derivative and the curcumin, we can see the curcumin derivative has the smallest HL gap, so less energy is needed to excite an electron. The chemical potential, we wanted the less negative for the reactivity. In this case was curcumin. For the chemical hardness, we wanted the lower value. In this case was the curcumin derivative. And finally, for the electrophilicity index, we wanted the highest value. So that one was also the curcumin derivative. So for 3 out of 4 of the descriptors we used, indicators that the curcumin derivative was actually more reactive than the curcumin itself, just by its own. So then we wanted to do a little approximation of the emission wavelength. So you can see here is a little representation of what happens. So we have the electrons in the HOMO, and light of a certain wavelength hits them. One electron is excited and goes up to the LUMO. And this state is not stable. It wants to go back to the stable state, that is the ground state. So the electron will jump back to the HOMO, from the LUMO to the HOMO, and will release that energy they had gained by a photon. Sorry. So with that, with a difference of energy, we could do a little bit of approximation of what the energy of this photon will have, and the wavelength it will have. So using the HOMO-LUMO graph and the equation that relates energy and wavelength, we could calculate the wavelength. We got 109 nanometers. It was higher than we were expecting. We were expecting something in the visible spectrum. This is ultraviolet. But still more, we don't want to discard this curcumin derivative, and more information can be obtained to have better results about this emission wavelength. So the results that we got show us that our curcumin derivative has a good binding affinity and a low inhibition constant. So that's desirable to the back-free protein that will be our target. Then the curcumin derivative shows more reactivity than the curcumin itself. So it's a better photosensitizer than the curcumin alone, according to the 3 out of 4 descriptors. And if we were to get the fluorescence spectrum of the curcumin derivative, we could have a more accurate information about the emission wavelength that we would get. In this case, can you show me? That's for future work, because currently we have calculated the Hessian for the ground state that is needed for calculating the fluorescence spectrum, but we lack the computational power to calculate the excited state. So when we get that, we can have an accurate approximation of the emitted wavelength. And that will be all I have for you guys today. Thank you. Yes, with computational tools, we actually right now I don't know how it is done. Sorry. Yes. Mhm. Yes, well, precisely the DFT helps us to compute those mu and eta and omega values using the HOMO and LUMO energy. With that, we can do an approximation of those values. Uh, the accuracy, I don't have right now the correct answer, but the DFT works with levels of theory, and depending on the one that you use, like the level of accuracy you can get, more or less, because it takes some considerations and approximations. So because we use mostly the HOMO-LUMO gap, the error that we can get is carried out. So that's why we could like say trust in our results.
So we have another question soon. And it's hi. Polyphenols, due to their antioxidant capacity, act as a process of chain oxidation processes by the formation of phenoxyl radicals. As a therapeutic agent, how would it favor the process?
I actually don't know the answer to this question right now. Sorry.
The efficacy of this molecule, so they discriminate between cancer cells or healthy cells.
By its own, no, but the application of the curcumin derivative can be tried to be as localized as possible, and the light also localized as possible. So only cancer cells are affected, and try to keep healthy cells without any effect.
On the other hand, in cancer, polyphenols can act at the level of the regulatory purpose. For particular practices, the molecule must be internalized if the bioavailability is limited. Due to solubility and high activity, it is considered that the interaction modified models in silicon could be viable in certain systems.
Do you want the microphone?
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Dr. Belmont. I mentor at Tally during the process. Let me read again the question. What about the specificity of these molecules? Do they discriminate between cancer cells and healthy cells? No, the answer is no, but cancer cells have like the ability of basically eat everything. So the therapy that we are proposing here is that we are counting that cancer cells will try to eat more molecules of the photosensitizer than the healthy cells, okay? And with that natural behavior, we expect that the concentration of these photosensitizers will be higher in cancer cells. Also, we can look for vectors that can trigger the deployment of these molecules specific in cancer cells. So for example, another way in which we can do this is through the use of nanoparticles. But that definitely comes in a later level of theory. Now, on the other hand, in cancer, polyphenols generally act at the level of transient regulation, positive interactions exist. The molecule must be internalized. Yes, absolutely. If the viability is limited due to the low solubility and high reactivity, is it considered that interaction models in silico could be viable in cellular systems? Well, actually, that's a technical challenge, because what we're trying to do is to model through computing and the Schrodinger equation systems that are biological. And the Schrodinger equation usually it's applied for smaller systems. So that's why we're using different tools that can be used. in order for to achieve this objective. But if you want to send me an email, then I can answer further. Thank you very much.
Wait, we have another question. Never mind. It seems so, yeah. Yes. Yes. Well, I think we can explain it because normally in our bodies we usually don't excite the molecules. So with excitation, the energy is the one that's gonna produce the reactive oxygen species. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so. All right, so thank you so much. So in case you have any questions that weren't answered in this talk, remember you can always contact our presenters. So up next, we have a presentation from the College of Biotechnology by Maria Ximena Hernandez. So I will let you go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I first want to thank everyone that participated in the organization of this event. I also want to thank the judges for being here. My name is Maria Ximena Hernandez, and I am a senior biotechnology student, and I'm going to present my research project that I've been working on for the past 7 months in collaboration with the National Institute of Geriatrics, under the supervision of Dr. Juan Berjan. This research project is about the geospatial analysis in socioeconomic factors affecting the prevalence of neglected tropical diseases in Mexican senior citizens. I want to start off this presentation with a small statistic statement made by CONAPO in 2018. It states that by 2040, the senior citizen population of 60 years or more will surpass the youth population of 15 years or more. This is a rather worrying statement if we don't focus our attention in the following years into this part of society. The content outline of this presentation will be as follows, and I'm going to start with the introduction. For the introduction, I want to define first what neglected tropical diseases are. These are also called NTDs. NTDs are infectious and often neglected diseases. This neglection can be because of the incubation or long incubation period these pathogens that causes these diseases have. This also leads to a late diagnostics of the diseases. NTDs are also related with social stigma because of the symptomatology they present. It's very visual and physical. A very important and key characteristic of NTDs is that they are affected by environmental and socioeconomic factors. And so people living in disadvantage will have more risk to have these types of diseases. For this project, we chose 5 main NTDs here in Mexico, and we want to evaluate them in senior citizens. We chose these NTDs because of 3 main factors. The first one being the methodology of infection, then the relationship it has with the social dynamics here in Mexico, and lastly, the symptomatology they present. The first NTD is leprosy, which is caused by Microbiomes leprae. Its methodology of infection is through frequent exposure to nasopharyngeal fluids. It's important to notice the frequent exposure because this has been related with family nucleus. And this is also the relationship it has with Mexico. In Mexico, 28% of households inhabit big families, and this is also related with low income or disadvantage in economic factors. The symptomatology of leprosy is ulcers, dark spots, nodules, and in some extreme cases, amputations. Then we have cystic fibrosis, which is caused by Tania solium in the larvae stage. Its methodology of infection is through the ingesta of uncooked meat, specifically cattle meat. This is related with Mexico because Mexico has many states that are cattle raising states. The symptomatology of this disease causes is seizures and headache. Then we have leishmaniasis, which is caused by the leishmania parasite, and its methodology of infection is through a vector, in this case, a mosquito bite. It is related with sleeping outdoors, and this is the same relationship it has with Mexico, because Mexico has many plantations, specifically like cacao plantations, in which the workers are led to sleep outdoors. The symptomatology of leishmaniasis is ulcers, nodules, and scars. For tuberculosis, which is the next disease, it is caused by Microbiomes tuberculosis, and its methodology of infection is the same as in leprosy, but is not necessary for frequent exposure. It is correlated here in Mexico with the incidence of diabetes. For the symptomatology of tuberculosis, we have fever, chills, cough, and loss of appetite. The last disease we chose is syphilis, which is caused by Treponema pallidum. Its methodology of infection is through sexual contact or non-safe sex practices. The relationship in Mexico is that sex workers tend to have this type of work because of low income or poverty situation. The symptomatology of syphilis is fever, headache, hair loss, and rash. As you can see, the majority of these diseases have similar physical symptomatology. But the main reason we chose all of these, and one of the key characteristics they share in common, is that they tend to chronify. And because we are assessing senior citizens, this is very important to see these diseases in old age. Our objectives were to observe the spread of NTDs in senior Mexican citizens throughout the years from 2000 to 2019. And we also want to correlate the percentage of pensioners with the prevalence of these diseases. The percentage of pensioners will be our socioeconomic factor. Our hypotheses were that we expect to see clusters of NTDs cases in Mexico, and we also expect to see the percentage of pensioners showing a negative correlation with the prevalence of NTDs cases. A negative correlation, it means that as one variable goes up or increase, the other variable will decrease. The methodology that we use is the following, and I'm going to break them down in the following slides. We start with the data retrieval from a database. In this case, was the official Mexican government website. We used all of the open data that was available only for senior citizens of these entities from the year 2000 to 2019. Here we also downloaded the shapefile, which is a map of Mexico from the INEGI, and this was used as a base for all of the maps that we generated. Then we generated these maps with the software of Geoda. We generated 4 quantum maps for each disease because we divided the time periods as follows. From 2000 to 2005, the second map from 2006 to 2010, then from 2011 to 2015, and lastly from 2016 to 2019. Then we go to the geospatial analysis. We use the Moran's eye, which is a parameter to observe geospatial distribution. The Moran's eye, what it's going to tell us is if there is clustering of the information, and so that the information is not randomly spread in the map. What this is going to give us is a correlation within the geographical space or the state itself. We are not introducing the socioeconomic factor yet. We use the Geoda default settings, which is the univariate Moran's eye, and this utilizes something that is called the weights, and we use the Queen's weight. What the Queen's weight is going to do is to take into consideration the neighbors of each state that are located at the site, and it's called the Queen's because it's just as the movement of the Queen in a chess game. We also calculated the Z-score, which is going to give us if the Moran's eye are significant or not. We did it with the randomization and 999 permutations. The Moran's eye is going to give us maps which are color-coded as indicated there. We're only going to focus in the red or blue color. The red indicates our hotspots. These hotspots are clustering of high cases of the entities, while the blue or color or the gold spots indicate clustering of low cases of these entities. For the geospatial correlation, we first retrieved the percentage of pensioners per state from Coneval. Then we did again quantum maps in Geoda from these years that were the only ones that were available. And we also see the Pearson and Spearman correlation calculation with R2. These are the results that we have up to now, and I'm going to start explaining them with leprosy. Here we have the quantum map that I've been talking about of leprosy. It's quite simple to understand. The darker orange colors indicate higher cases of leprosy, while the whiter or lighter orange colors indicate lower cases of leprosy. I also added this graph to see how the cases of leprosy change over time. And as you can see in the graph, Sinaloa is the state that had highest cases of leprosy throughout the years. I only added one Moran's eye map because the other one's maps of other periods of time were either insignificant or the same as this. Here we can see a low, slow, or cold spot in Hidalgo, meaning that we have a clustering of low cases of leprosy in that region. We move on to cysticicosis. Cysticicosis was rather interesting because, as you can see, both in the maps and in the graph, Jalisco was the state with the highest cases of cysticicosis, and Jalisco is the first leading state of cattle raising here in Mexico. So our data makes sense if we recall the cysticicosis methodology of infection. Here we also have the Moran's eye map, and we have both cold spots and hot spots. Cold spots mainly in the peninsula and hot spots in Jalisco. For leishmaniasis, we encounter our first limitation of the study. As you can see in the maps, we have an even color of orange, and this is not because we don't have cases of leishmaniasis, but it was not registered. We have no record of these cases for this state, but we managed to analyze also the Moran's eye. And here we can see that in the southeast of Mexico, we have clustering of high cases of leishmaniasis, while in the north, we have low cases of leishmaniasis. Then we move on to tuberculosis, which is the one that I find the most interesting. As you can see here in the maps, most of the cases of tuberculosis are located in the southeast of Mexico. And if we look into the graph, we can see that Veracruz, by far, is the state that had highest cases of tuberculosis throughout all of the years. But if you pay close attention below Veracruz, we have another state, Guerrero, and they follow the same pattern throughout the years, even if they don't have the same amount of cases. This can be explained because of the nature of tuberculosis having some deactivation or latency stages of the disease. So they decreased by 2016, they increased again by 2011, and they decreased by 2016. We also have many hotspots here in tuberculosis, again in the southeast of Mexico, but again in the peninsula, we have even clustering of low cases of tuberculosis. The last disease is syphilis, and as you can see, it's all over the place throughout the years. Some states contain a constant cases of syphilis, while some decrease over the years, and some like Baja California Sur, they increase drastically up to 2016. Here we only see some clustering of low cases of syphilis near Jalisco and in Jalisco and in the north. So now we move on to the percentage of pensioners. It's the same principle here. As you can see, the higher percentage of pensioners are located in the north and also in the peninsula of Mexico, while the lower percentage of cases are located in the southeast. If we start to connect everything that we've seen up to now, this makes sense, or we could have negative correlation as you expect. So we move on to the correlation with the percentage of pensioners. As I've mentioned, we did both Pearson and the Spearman calculations. One of them will indicate a negative correlation if they have a value near -1 or near -1. This graph corresponds to the Pearson correlation. And so here, this graph is the percentage of pensioners in Veracruz versus the cases of tuberculosis in Veracruz. We have here a perfect negative correlation. So what this means is that as a percentage of pensioners in Veracruz increase, the cases of tuberculosis in the state will decrease. And so we do have our negative correlation in some of these states. This table corresponds to the RHO, which is a correlation coefficient for the Spearman method. And so we have here the the main results of these entities reached some of the states, and some were non-significant with the NS, or some were negative correlated. If you notice, all of these states are located in the southeast of Mexico, the same region in which the lowest percentage of pensioners were located. And so what can we conclude with this information? Basically, that the states with lowest percentage of pensioners were located in the southeast of Mexico. These same regions showed at least one negative correlation with the entities. So what this means is, as the percentage of pensioners increased in this region, at least, the cases of entities show a decrease in prevalence. What can we do with this information? We could approach and increase the percentage of pensioners for this region that could avoid the prevalence of entities. And you know, this is very important because one of the main reasons why senior citizens are in poverty situations is because of lack of pensions. And so this research project is just the first step for us to realize the importance of this socioeconomic and social help the government can give. And that will be it. Thank you.
Questions from the audience?
Any questions on Zoom?
Yeah, I would expect that too, but in the website it indicated as no registration, like it was missing. Maybe it's a bit. Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
You mentioned that tuberculosis was related or was closely related somehow with diabetes. This is an ignorant question. I'm a physicist. What's the relationship? I don't understand. I didn't know that, and I don't understand that.
I don't know exactly the relationship, but I do know that it has been tested and they correlated those diabetes and tuberculosis. It may be because of the immune system, maybe like you have more risk of tuberculosis.
One of the very important things is that in the sciences is correlation with cancer and flight mortality.
Yes.
So I'm curious about that one because it's an ignorant question. My second comment, how do you show the time flow of every 5 years to verify? I would have thought that perhaps every 6 years you would look at terms for government.
Yes.
And the social health.
We actually try to do it as close as possible to each period of presidency.
Yeah, can be approached to move forward back to one.
Yeah, totally. It could be even for COVID-19 could be with this approach to see how it is spread in Mexico. Maybe not socioeconomic factors, but there could be some factors affecting. but the same analysis can be done. Yeah, as long as we have the data, it's possible. If they are characterized as neglected tropical diseases, I could have, but if they are not, this test or this evaluation research project is just about neglected tropical diseases. I don't know if they are neglected tropical diseases. Yeah, we could. Yeah, that would enter as health accessibility of each state, and that could also be a socioeconomic factor. We haven't made these considerations yet, but this is also a limitation of the project. We are just like describing the data geographically, because we don't really can take into account all of the factors that affect the cases of these entities. So yeah, that is actually a limitation of the project.
Thank you, Maria Ximena. Now we are going to welcome Maria Fernanda Ramos from Biotechnology with the presentation of the effects of different toothpaste on microorganisms found in the oral cavity.
Hi everyone, my name is Fernanda Ramos. I am senior in the Biotechnology major.
Okay.
Let me start again. Hi everyone, my name is Fernanda Ramos. I am a senior in the major Biotechnology, and today I'm going to be talking about a microbiology project that I did last semester along with 3 other students. So the name of our project is the effect of different toothpaste on microorganisms found in the oral cavity. The presentation layout will be the following. First, I'm going to introduce you to some background information, as well as the research question, hypothesis, the methodology, and I'm going to end up discussing the results that we got. So first, I would like to start talking about oral microbiomes. As you may know, we all have an already existing oral microbiome within our mouths that helps the human body to combat undesirable stimulation from the outside, such as bacteria. Also, if there's an imbalance of this microbial flora, this can give rise to oral diseases and systematic diseases. The most common oral diseases there is tooth decay and dental cavities. Tooth decay is the result of metabolic activity of microbes within the mouth, and this happens when sucrose is broken down into glucose and fructose gets fermented into lactic acid that dissolves the minerals of the tooth enamel. Dental cavities, these are untreated infections that can become abscesses that can spread deeper into tissues, roots, or even into the bloodstream. So now talking about the benefits of the toothpaste. We all know why we use toothpaste, right? To clean our mouth and to remove plaque and excess buildup of bacteria, but they also help us to combat gum disease and also strengthens the tooth enamel. But what is in the toothpaste? So the toothpaste is composed of gentle abrasives such as magnesium carbonate, hydrating agents such as glycerin and sorbitol, thickeners like seaweed, detergents to give these foamy sensations, flavoring agents, and fluoride to strengthen the tooth enamel. As I mentioned before, we all have an oral microbiome within our mouth, and there are a lot of different microbes existing there. But the two most common ones in the mouth are Streptococci and Lactobacilli. The thing with Streptococci is that there's a lot of types of Streptococci, but the one that is found in the mouth is called Streptococci mutans, and this one accounts for the 80% of multi-biolayer biofilms on the teeth. This is a gram-positive bacteria, and it is usually found in the throat and in the skin. For Lactobacilli, this is the bacteria that is responsible for the already existing lesions and injuries to progress, such as coronal caries. This is a gram-negative bacteria, and this is a probiotic organism that is usually found in the digestive and urinary tract. So the purpose of this study is to evaluate the microorganisms that were found in the students of Arkansas State University, Campus Querétaro, and to determine the antimicrobial activity that the 4 different toothpastes that we chose had in the bacteria that we found on the student's mouth. In order to do this, we have to calculate the inhibition zone of each toothpaste of the different bacteria sample from the student's mouth, and to determine which bacteria is susceptible to which ingredients in the 4 different toothpastes. So it all comes down to the question, which toothpaste will have a higher antimicrobial activity on the oral cavity? So the hypothesis of this research is that even though most of the toothpaste contain fluoride, the one that contains stannous fluoride will yield the highest antimicrobial activity on the oral cavity. So here are the toothpastes that we use. We use Oral-B, which active component is stannous fluoride. Charcoal toothpaste, which active component is charcoal. Toothpaste and brighter fluoride, which active component is Maleluca. And fluoride, I think it's worth to be noticed that this is the most expensive toothpaste. It's a high-end toothpaste. And lastly, but not least, Arm & Hammer toothpaste, which active component is just natural baking soda. So now jumping into the methodology. First, we have to prepare our medium, which was the neutron agar medium. We prepared about 35 of this, and then we obtained samples from the students, also 35 students from the Arkansas State University Campus Querétaro, using a cotton swab. After we have done this, we prepare a massive culture per each petri dish, and we incubated this at 37 degrees Celsius for about 24 to 48 hours, and these were refrigerated. Once these were taken out, we isolated the microbial colonies using the strict plate method of isolation. Then we perform our gram staining technique. Later, we isolated the Streptococci and Lactobacillus using the quadrant strict method. And we used Whatman filter paper, and we submerged this in the 4 different toothpastes that we use. And we placed these in each quadrant of each petri dish. And these were also incubated at 37 degrees Celsius for 24 to 48 hours. These are our results for gram staining techniques. As you can see in figure 1, Lactobacilli came back as gram negative, and Streptococcus came back as gram positive. It's worth to be noticed as well that this technique is used to differentiate the cell wall that bacteria have. But in this case, we also use it to identify Streptococcus from Lactobacilli. It is also worth to mention that we do not usually use gram staining techniques for this, but in this case, we determine which was which just by the shape. So it has to be said that further research has to be done in order to tell with accuracy which or what bacteria we actually have in the sample. So these are our cultures. In figure 3 and figure 4, we can see the positive control for lactobacilli and streptococcus. I don't know if you are going to be able to tell, but lactobacilli in figure 3 is a little bit more yellowish than the figure 4, but it's just because it is split with lactobacilli, and figure 4 is split with streptococcus. In figure 5, we can see the results of inhibition of each toothpaste. In the figure part, in the left side, we can see Arm & Hammer. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell, but this is the halo that Arm & Hammer had for lactobacilli. We can see that's the biggest halo, followed by Oral B, that is right next to it. And the two above are Charcoal and Maleluca, which had no effect on lactobacilli. In figure 6, we can see the same for Streptococcus. As again, we can see in the upper part of the plate that Arm & Hammer had the biggest inhibition zone, followed by Oral B as well. But in this case, Charcoal and Maleluca did have some effect on Streptococcus. So here's the same thing. We are just, it's a graph about the average inhibition of Lactobacillus and Streptococcus. Again, Arm & Hammer had the biggest inhibition zone, followed by Oral B, while Maleluca and Charcoal had no effect. For graph 2, we can see as well that Arm & Hammer had the biggest inhibition zone, followed by Oral B, then Charcoal, and last, Maleluca. Let's remember, this is the most expensive one. Okay, here, we can tell that our hypothesis was rejected because Arm & Hammer, the toothpaste that had no fluoride, performed better with a mean of 2.06 in Lactobacillus and 3.4 in Streptococcus. These both Arm & Hammer and Oral B were analyzed. The results were analyzed using a unpaired t-test because the results passed the normality test. While Maleluca and Charcoal, we used a non-parametric Mann-Whitney test because the results did not pass the normality test, with giving us an average of 0 centimeters, causing the curve to be skewed to the right. Also, all our samples were statistically significant with a p-value less than 5%. Therefore, our null hypothesis was rejected. In conclusion, this is pretty straightforward. The toothpaste that caused the biggest inhibition zone was Arm & Hammer, and followed by Oral B. And yes, that's it.
How can you tell if the lactobacillus is no more than positive but negative now?
So as I mentioned before, we just determined the bacteria by shape. As I said, we have to do further research to tell with accuracy which bacteria are actually found in the samples.
The question is, record colonies were insulated on agents such as it's important to distinguish between the species of subject of that may be considered
where in this case we chose agar because it's the most simple and more factible, how do you say, factible to use, because a lot of bacteria can grow in there. So that's why we choose it.
Also, what is your hypothesis based on fluoride? And not on the other that is
Then the word again.
why is the hypothesis based on fluoride and not the other answers that is
Yes, we chose fluoride as the main ingredient because we know that a lot of toothpaste rely on fluoride to combat these oral diseases. So that's why we based our research on fluoride, not other antimicrobial ingredients. So yes, that's a good question that we can look later into. Yes. Can you rephrase the question? Oh, it is strengthened by fluoride. Uh, I may guess it. I mean, we also deduce from the gram staining technique that you know, lactobacillus came back as positive, and positive bacteria has an outer membrane, which makes it thinner, but this makes resistance to be bigger to to antibiotics. So that's why we also hypothesize that this has to do with the result that we got. And
What is the nexus between characterization process? What is the next step to do characterization?
so there are a lot of techniques to characterize bacteria, such as to see the metabolic activity, the enzymes that they produce, and yeah, that thing that will be the next step to follow.
Now, and instead, when feedback like solar, but the other things in anaerobic method under the conditions probiotic and without the solar how likely is that isolated sensitizer to level? So I'm guessing they're asking how is it that we know that the isolate when your conditions are the ones that you propose?
Again, just by faith, we need further research to correlate this. Yes. I say it's gram positive because we got it as the pinkish color, meaning that it's gram negative, no gram positive. Yeah, this is what we got on the results. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, okay. Oh, yes. I got confused. Yes.
Yep. Right. So, thank you so much. Right. So thank you for the very interesting presentation, Fernanda. Up next, we have a presentation from the College of Biotechnology. Specifically, our speaker is André Chardrecona. The title of the presentation is Using the Highly Toxic Plant of Datura ferox to Help Reduce Joint and Muscular Pain. So please, Mr. Recona, take it away.
Okay, so, well, my companion already introduced me, but I'm going to do it again. I'm a senior biotechnology student, and my name is André Leporna.
And I'm going to be talking about using the highly toxic plant of the Ferox to make an ointment to treat muscular and joint pain. I will explain very briefly as an introduction how it came to mind using a toxic plant to treat, to attempt to treat muscular and joint pain. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Huichol culture, the Huicholes. They have been using this plant for over 3,000 years as medical use. Although, of course, it's not medically proven, it's not scientifically proven, but for over 3,000 years, the knowledge has been passed on about using this plant on the treatment of muscle pain. Now, what I'm trying to do here is to perform that into an ointment based on a similar idea of what they do. What they do is that they do a paste with the plant area or the plant parts, and they put it on you. That's basically the procedure of what they do. Now I'm just trying to make an ointment, and I'm trying to explain and see what is the reason, what is the mechanism behind it, and see if it can be produced and used, and well, if it can be safe to use in humans. Now the hypothesis is that it can be treated with making a homogeneous mixture between water and acetone to extract the alkaloids that are found in the plant that are needed to treat this muscle and joint pain. I'll explain a little bit the alkaloids, what they are, the functions, but these alkaloids are derived from tropins. Now, as the objective is basically to take advantage of the three most present alkaloids in the plant in order to make the ointment or the treatment. I just want to specify that this is not a cure, this is not a miracle product. The idea behind this is to make it a simple treatment. There are already other products that are used for that, but perhaps it could be more efficient since it was found in the past that it was pretty efficient. So perhaps we could improve that or use that for some advantage. Okay, I'm just going to give a brief introduction about the plant. There's a lot of mysticism behind this plant. It is in the culture, in the culture belief, it is said that this plant it's used to make someone fall in love with you. Although of course that it hasn't been proved, that is not known, but that is the myth. It's also, what it is known about this plant is that it is highly toxic. If consumed, it can cause brain damage. Another thing that goes around the plant is that it is used also in cultural and well, religious uses by some certain Mexican cultures. The Huicholes also as well. They use it as a transition state from kids into puberty. Now, this plant is native to Central America. It is perennial. It can grow in almost every weather in Mexico except for desert, plain desert. That's the only place in Mexico in which it cannot be found. An advantage of this plant is that it can grow in almost every type of soil. It can grow in soils that are contaminated by heavy metals and actually likes this type of soil, and can produce a lot of viable seeds and a lot of leaves actually. And well, finally, it has a high germination rate, so it's very easy to grow. It's very easy to cultivate. Now, the alkaloids that we're going to be extracting are atropine, glutamine, and scopolamine. Okay. Atropine can be used as treatment for low heart rate. It can also be used before surgery to reduce secretions of the body fluid. Now, the thought mechanism of action of how it could be used is that it will block the migration of leukocytes toward the site of inflammation or the site of pain. Now, through MC receptors and M4 receptors from the nucleosinic cell receptors, what atropine does is that it blocks the action of acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that is the one in charge of carrying the information. In M3 pathway, the receptors are found in the blood vessels, and in M4, they're found at the termination of the central nervous system. Okay, so isoxamin, well, it's used in treatment of Parkinson's and transient bladder control. It works the same way as atropine through the M3 and M4 pathway, and well, inhibit muscle cell signaling for swelling and pain. Now, here is a very interesting thing that is not entirely known yet, but it avoids the mechanism of bradykinin. Bradykinin is not entirely known, but it's not entirely known its synthesis procedure, but it's known to act in the sensation of pain and alerting the body of pain. So what isoxamin has been found to do is that it can block, not inhibit the bradykinin entering into the ending nerve cells. And finally, scopolamine. Scopolamine is actually known that it can enter through the skin because there are patches of scopolamine. And the mechanism of action is that it's basically a relaxing agent, as the other one is anticholinergic, meaning that they block the pathway of acetylcholine. And well, it is also been found that it can avoid the overheating in the area of pain. These are the materials that were used. Now I'll explain a little bit in a more, but it's a very simple process. What we need are the seeds. We are using the seeds for two main reasons. One, because these are the parts that contain the most quantity of the alkaloids, because the plant uses for metabolistic purposes. And well, acetone and water that will be our solvent. Beeswax, that is going to be our emulsifier. Coconut oil, that is going to be our lipid, in order for the alkaloids to be able to enter through the skin. I'll explain that a little bit further on. And well, the same place in order to make the mixture. Now, it's important to have a certain protocol in mind because, as I mentioned, this plant is toxic. So it's very important not to ingest the plants, or when I'll explain the procedure, you need to grind the seeds. So when the grinding of the seeds occurs, it's important not to inhale the dust that comes out of the seeds. And it's important that when you're boiling, not to inhale the vapors. So this is how it was done. First, we weighed 5 grams of the seeds. We suspend them in 100 milliliters homogeneous mixture of water and acetone. The reason as to why water is mixed with acetone is because the seeds have a very high germination rate. If you leave them only in water, you will trigger the germination phase. Once you trigger the germination phase, obviously the alkaloids that are used for metabolic purposes will tend to decrease. So we need the acetone to heal the embryo of the seed and to avoid the germination triggering. Okay, once after we do that, we separate the liquid from the solid, but we do not discard the liquid. We're going to use it again because there is, in theory, there we have our solution. We grind the crush and we put it into a fine powder, and that's what we need to make sure not to breathe. And then we add water and we put it to boil. We mix it. After it finishes time boiling, which is 30 minutes, we mix it for another 10 minutes while it's boiling. Well, sorry, 75 to 80 degrees. And we can stop now the heating phase. This hot liquid, we're gonna put it in a beaker where we already have beeswax and coconut oil. And the hot liquid that we already adding is gonna help into doing the mixture. In case it's needed, you can add more hot water, but it rarely is needed. And well, what are the results? It's basically just theoretically because there's not that much yet to be done. Well, besides here that I have a small, I'll explain a little bit of what I have here. But well, the seeds were used, as I mentioned before, because they have the amounts of alkaloids, and also because of the season that I started doing this. Since the plant is perennial, well, the only parts that were available from the plant were seeds. But all the parts of the plant contain the alkaloids, so all the parts of the plant can be used alongside during the whole year. What you will need to change is the concentration of what part you're using. As I mentioned, water as solvent can trigger the germination process. And well, the ointment in theory should contain the lipophilic pathway for the alkaloids to enter through the skin. Well, water and acetone are the polar solvents. They should enter through the skin by lipophilic action. This is entirely theoretically what it should be expected, but it's yet to be studied. And it should be seen an anti-inflammatory effect due to the action of atropine through the M3 and M4 pathways. And well, one thing that is to be kept in mind is just as a projection that if a daily use could cause a skin rash, and this may due to the effect of isosamine. Isosamine is known to cause a side effect rash in human body, and isosamine can also be allergic to some people and cause rash in the skin. So that should be something to keep into mind as a projection as what could be a possible side effect. Basically, this is what we have been talking. Atropine should be the anti-inflammatory carrier. Scopolamine should be the pain reducer. And well, a TLC analysis can be applied to measure if there is any final concentration at the end of once we get the ointment. And well, it should be noted at some point, there's going to be needed to do in vitro and in vivo testing before saying that it's safe to use in humans. And well, also something that is going to be needed to be measured in depth is pain inhibition to see if it can actually help in pain inhibition, because it won't work for anything if you cannot increase pain. So what I have here, I mean, if you look at the data of the procedures, this obviously does not match with the quantities that I gave. That is because this had been the fourth trial. This was the second trial. For doing TLC analysis, for doing any other analysis, well, one doesn't need this many big amounts. So it's just it's very wasteful. That's something that I learned. So here I brought this on purpose, so you can see here the phases that are already divided. The emulsifier stopped doing its emulsifying job. So now we have the oil phase, the emulsifier, which stops emulsifying. And at the bottom, we have the powder of the seed with the alkaloid solution. Well, what in theory should be the alkaloid solution. I just brought it so you guys can see, so you know it's not alive. And in theory, this is the homogeneous mixture. But after a while, well, it just stops working. It divides in phases. As we all have seen that in certain food when the emulsifier stops working. And well, I just want to give an acknowledgement. Thank you very much to the committee and to Professor Barra Gonzalez for all the feedback and the committee for their guidance. That will be it. How what? This was done around December, but the phase is divided by March. It was done after Christmas. Yes, so far it's 3 months. Okay.
Why did you not expect them to stop that?
Because I didn't think of it. Uh-huh. Yes.
Second question is still sometimes unrelated. Did you look into the formulation and usage in India and Mexico, and how did you use
I look into the formulations in India. I look for how they manage to do an extraction, because I mean, probably the person who has knows more. Huh? Because probably the person who has knows more about me. But I think it was 2-3 years ago that they published how they find out structural dicycloids, like precisely. But I haven't really looked into Mexico. But yes, in India, they probably found out about it, and they published it. I think it was 2-3 years ago.
So one quick question to Zoom from Australia. For the procedure, use other than
Any member from the Datura family contain these alkaloids, so we're talking about, sorry, I'm going to say it in Spanish because I don't remember the name in English, but they're famously known as Floripondias. Any other Datura member? There are many, and there is one that is endemic also to India, but I don't remember the scientific name. I just know it's from the family of Daturas. Any member from the family Datura can be used because all of them possess these 3 alkaloids. Yes. Extremely toxic. Yes. Okay, so well, the TLC to see if at least the procedure is right and I'm extracting correctly the alkaloid. And then after that, well, there's probably what could be done should be measure how much is from 5 grams of crushed seeds, measure how much, well, uncrushed seeds, measure how much is extracted, and from there be able to quantify how much percentage of the substance is actually there, and then see how much rate. Dr. Cathy once mentioned that Xing could be used to make your solution. Well, absorption on the skin. Absorption on the skin. Outcome. Sorry. So after that, to measure how much is absorbed, and from there, see the quantity that is here, the quantity that is absorbed, and to see if that percentage is actually toxic, not toxic, viable, non-viable, reduce, increase. That is. No, in a very long future. I still need to see if the theory is right and the alcohol side extract are found in the solution. Mhm. Yes and no, because I don't remember the name, so I'm just gonna say no. But I remember I once asked you that question and you explained me, and I'm really sorry that I don't remember. HPLC. Mhm.
Unfortunately, we have made things of Belladonna, or most of the time, airports and structure. So if every single time these kind of compounds are being extracted with polar solvent, I would imply or I would deduce that this could remove the polar molecule. So what's the purpose of a polar molecule was not polar?
Did I refer to that? I referred to the polar solvent.
Well, we have a question regarding this being a polar molecule. For me, polar will be not polar molecule. Yes, we need to extract it using polar solvent. Would that imply that these hydrogens are polar electric?
Oh, no, because, well, I remember once you explaining that there's no middle point, there's no, so there's no entirely one that can be polar. Polar is not entirely something that can be soluble. It's an inspection.
But the fact that these highly polar solvents are used, like water and ethanol, for example, even if I know that it would be a total spectrum, it would be telling me that the molecule is going to be polar and not polar. Or at least the way that I observe it, or that would make a bit more confusion. I don't know if you have anything to add to that part. Is that I don't, for example, totally, if you take it totally, in water, it would not be polar. So even if it would be close to polar, I understand that that's not polar, but in this case, if I can make things that extraction, and ethanol extraction, I can make them one to be polar, than polar. So why do you consider them as a polar molecule, for example? The fact that I don't quite understand.
Oh, ignorance? I didn't know I was referring to them as apolar. You honestly got me by surprise.
It was just another question. It's the fact that maybe I was missing something that I couldn't see or couldn't understand.
Yeah, I mean, but I didn't see the correlation of using a polar solvent will make it apolar. Although, yes, I mean, yes, you're entirely right.
Yes. But let's see, that was my question. I just wanted to understand why each of it was apolar. Well, by the extraction method and the type of photo or something that was used for me, that's something that we are taking the most polar.
Okay. Mhm. Side effects, yes. For example, you mean about side effects that could be, yes. Well, there's one. The isociamine can cause rash. Scopolamine, since there are already scopolamine patches and they enter through the skin, scopolamine actually can cause, in excess, can cause brain damage, and it can also cause problems in the urinary tract. Sorry. And atropine can cause dizziness, and in some cases can cause hallucinations. In excess, can cause hallucinations. That is actually why the plant, when consumed, causes hallucinations, is with the atropine and scopolamine. And actually, scopolamine is some places it's called the zombie drug because of how it affects the brain. So those are some side effects that could occur that are to be seen. But the thing with this plant is that it is toxic when consumed or inhaled. If you grab the plant and you touch it, it's very rare that something's going to happen to you. So. Uh-huh. No, not yet. Uh-huh. Yes, that amount I cannot tell yet. No, there's no ignorance. Oh, because when you boil when you boil it into the water in the water, you actually, and then you do the stirring, you actually help to make a small type of paste. And in the witch-hunt procedure, what they do is that they put to boil all the parts, and then they cut them out and they make a paste, and that's what they put on it. So what I did was to boil it to see that help to do the paste, and actually helps once that you put it after you boil it and you stir it and you put it in the mixture with the beeswax and the coconut oil. It's easier to mix it. It's easier to make the homogeneous mixture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre, for that presentation. And now we will be welcoming Miren Ugarte from Biotechnology.
Well, hello, I'm Maitane Ugarte, and I'm a biotechnology student. And today I'm going to present to you the molecular docking and DFT analysis applied to the interaction study between valerianic acid and the GABA receptor. Okay, so as a context, okay, anxiety and sleeping disorders are a very important problem in today's health. Many people we know, and even us, can experience from these problems. In the United States, about the 33.7% of the population today suffers from anxiety, and the other 35% has some kind of sleeping disorder. This represents a huge part of our population, and we need to address this problem. Today, in the area of allopathic treatment, we use benzodiazepines. For example, diazepam, lorazepam, or clonazepam. There are many different brands and types. But benzodiazepines have a very big problem because they can generate very serious side effects on the patient, and they can even cause addiction, which could bring withdrawal syndromes and many other problems. As an example, in 2007, 85 million prescriptions were filed. That is a huge amount, and some of them are not even that necessary. So the health organizations are trying to reduce this amount of benzodiazepines prescribed, and so many alternative treatments such as plants are being proposed for this exchange. Specifically, one of them is valerian plant, which is proposed to have the same like good effects, but not the bad effects of the benzodiazepines. And for example, this is a basic structure of a benzodiazepine, and here is one of an extraction of valerian plant. As you can see, this like basic structure is repeated. Okay, from the valerian plant, there are many studies being conducted right now to pinpoint the active component. From the root, this component was extracted. It's called valerian acid, valerianic acid, sorry. And this is the one we choose to propose this methodology. Benzodiazepine and valerianic acid both have the same effect on the same protein. Here is the protein, and it's called the GABA A receptor. This is a pentanameric protein that is in the cell membrane of the molecule. Here is the intramembrane part, and here is the external area. And if we make a close-up to the active site with both compounds interact, we have these amino acids, which are the most prevalent in the interaction. To give a little more context about what we're going to do, we're going to talk about molecular docking, which is a bioinformatics tool used to describe interactions. They can be favorable or unfavorable on large systems, specifically between ligands and proteins. This is all these calculations this tool uses are based on charge difference or on Coleman charges. This study the specific active site, and it has low, in general, it has low computational cost and is friendly to its users. On the other hand, another tool that we're going to use is density function theory of DFT, which is a quantum mechanics tool for more precise interactions, specifically for smaller systems. They can be intra or intermolecular. It is really friendly to its users and has high computational cost. And all these interactions are resolved by the Oppenheimer's approximation to the Schrodinger's equation. It's basically a lot of physics stuff that makes you like pinpoint the energies between the molecules. Yes, and as I said, it's suitable for more smaller systems. Okay, the basic equations we're going to use to solve these problems are the Hess law, here is the equation, and the equilibrium constant. Free gives energy. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. No, it's not. It's the basic logarithm, but it's multiplied by 10. It's not the base of the logarithm. Okay. Well, for our hypothesis and our objective. The hypothesis was to use a computational technique, like in a conjoined manner, to see these interactions happen between the ligand, valerianic acid, and the protein, the GABA A receptor. For the objectives, we wanted to understand the interactions of the active site of the receptor. We also wanted to develop a methodology that allowed for a general description of the panorama between these interactions and an in-depth approach of the interactions between the specific groups of the ligand and specific amino acids. And point out the most relevant interactions from molecular docking and study them further. Okay, for our methodology, first we wanted to validate our ligand and see if it was usable for humans. And we run it through the Lipinski rules, where are a set of therapeutic parameters in order to see if they are usable. And it complies with all the characteristics. For the protein validation, we run it through a Jafara server, which basically minimizes the structure to the most optimized energies. Here are the pre and post Madashan plots, and we can see the energy here is more concentrated in the islands. Okay, for molecular docking, we set a number of 100 runs as a first approach for these interactions with 25 million energetic evaluations between these ligands and the active site. As I mentioned, it works by Coleman charges. In the program, the protein was fixed. This means that it could not move around. It was like all its parts were frozen, but the ligand was able to rotate around the active site. Okay, for DFT, we use a specific method that is called not elastic band method, or NEBTF, which basically is an optimization of the transition state. And it helps us to try to guess trajectories between the reactions and the products and like find out how they move. And it also calculates some frequencies of these interactions. The functional we used was BP86. The basis set was DFT, and we used D3DJ as empirical dispersion. Okay, for the first result, we have the result for molecular docking. Here is the picture of how the ligand was like inserted in the active site, like an overview. The estimated free energy of binding that the software provided was minus 6.36 kilocalories per mole, and an inhibition constant of 13.1, 71, sorry, which makes this a favorable interaction. But we wanted to find out more specifically about the in-depth interaction. Here is just a 2D version of the interaction and the amino acids it has connected, and 3D, and here is the 3D version. Of all those interactions, you may be wondering how we choose the most relevant one. The majority of these interactions were alkalis, which are, and this one specifically, the glycine of the D22 line was a hydrogen bond. And we decided to use that one because it was the stronger in this specific model. But before we get to the specific interactions between the ligand and the amino acids, we wanted to see if the optimized geometry of the ligand and the ligand that the molecular docking throw back at us after this interaction had occurred could like bend from one conformation to the other. We got an endothermic process and inhibition constant of practically 0, which means this molecule does not like to fall to the conformation given us by molecular docking. But the molecular docking is not like thrown out here because we can still get information of the interactions as I mentioned on the previous slide. Okay, so as we are proposing this interaction does occur, we believe that it could have been between the two acids, the acid from the ligand and the acid from the acid group from the amino acids, and form a dimer. Okay, for the results of the DFT part. Here is an ideal model of these interactions between the glycine 22 amino acids and the ligand. As you can see here, the orientation between those two groups is really adequate and they're really close together and it's pretty perfect. So we thought that this idealized model could help us give us like the idea of the energies we're talking about. Okay, this gave us a negative delta G, but which is a good thing. It makes it a favorable reaction, as you can see, because it is below the 0. However, the transitional state proposed by this interaction is of 1.95, which is huge. And these different interactions could be a problem when the interaction would happen. So this interaction was deemed favorable, but unlikely to happen. So we dug a little bit more now with the orientations that molecular docking provided to us. And here it is. As you can see, they are not so close together and they're a little bit bent because this is what molecular docking told us that the interaction would look like. So we worked on this. As you can see, this energy is completely different. It's of minus 18.24. This step is huge. And the transitional state that we chose is the first one, and it's of 26.07, which means that the energy remanence between these two points is of 7.53, which is astonishingly similar to the energy provided us by molecular docking, which means that the dispersion of energy of the system is around at least that order of magnitude. This is and here's a little animation of how this dimerization occurs. And there will be where the timer first. Yeah. Okay, but we needed to validate our idea and not presume that it was mere chance. So we propose a simplified model. Here is a simplified like ligand, that it would be 3,4-butaneric acid, and with the same glycan amino acid. As we can see, these reactions give us a positive result, which means it's not favorable. So this helps us to conclude that the favorability of the past reactions were not based on the dimer formation by itself, but the capacity of the valerianic acid to disperse the electron energy in order to promote that interaction. And so for our conclusion, we qualify valerianic acid as a suitable candidate to be interchangeable with benzoes, of course, with further studying. The dimer interaction is possible and favorable. And the methodology presented of this broad approach to molecular docking and an in-depth analysis of DFT is a good way to get this panorama and overview for how molecules work. And also, well, the level of theory used for this project was a first good approximation, but could help us to have higher parameters with more advanced levels. Okay, for the further development of the project, we would like to expand the methodology to interactions to compare them between benzodiazepine and this valerianic acid to see what is the real difference in energetic terms. We would like to re-improve the protein through molecular dynamics. The molecular docking area would involve to add no rotatable bonds to the molecule, increase the number of runs, increase the number of evaluations also. For DFT, we'll use a higher level of theory, which is beat relief, a higher functional, and we will also apply surface scan, that is another computational technique in DFT.
Any questions? Okay, so question from Alejandra Prieto Dago. So it's not an interaction better than the benzos like Computational Analysis. The molecule
well, I no one say which project like I suppose this project is much better because he has a doctorate or something. But it's a different approach. We have this bench work. This works on solid on liquid things, and here is just computational analysis. We're trying to prove the effectiveness of our computers to provide us with results that could be valuable and applicable to further research. I don't know that paper, and I don't know. But for my research, I couldn't find anyone that talked about specifically valerianic acid, like of this energy interaction. Mhm.
And I was wondering where are the cases of great to see, but certain things haven't taken so far.
Yes.
So I was wondering.
Well, I suppose there's no perfect mathematical algorithm, and as this is like it's just math trying to work like very complicated equations with it can only take you so far. I don't know if there is a numerical limitation to the program, but math can only take you somewhere, and also the in silico or in vitro. Yes, but in vitro and in vivo project can only take you so far as well. So maybe a combination of both would be.
But it's so interesting to know
Yeah, but maybe Dr. Belmont can tell you if there's like a numerical limitation to Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, it's more about, okay, I understand these two groups are very important from the interaction and probably have great effects on how they talk to a protein. But in this, like the basic structure, it's conform of more or less the same, like it's the same size, more or less. So it probably fits on the same axis. And it has like, this is like just an extended version, and many benzodiazepines have also aggregated. Yes. Yes. Ah. Yes. Mhm. 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 Yeah, in reality, I didn't ask them because, as you mentioned, benzodiazepines are a great group, and I didn't like knew how to pick the best one. But I understand perfectly your point. Yeah. 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 Mhm. Okay. Mhm. Yeah, as I mentioned, there is much work to be done. This is was just like a first approximation to an idea. But yes. Mhm. Yeah. My statement about that they have the same effect was based on the literature, not my personal opinion. There are many papers that evaluate these similar interactions between both of them. Probably.
Right. So thank you so much, Miran, for such an amazing presentation and so innovative. Last but most definitely not least, we have our final presentation of the day from the Department of Biotechnology. Our speaker today is Alison Aldar Sutz Maldonado. So please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alison, and today I'm going to present you our project testing the antimicrobial properties of commercial disinfectants. I did this project last semester with other classmates under the supervision of Master Maria Angelica Costa Marroquin. So this is my table of concepts. This is what I'm going to talk about today. So nowadays, with the SARS-CoV-2 outbreak, sanitization protocols have become stricter. So the recommendation from the CDC to prevent the spread of germs is that you should wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Washing your hands can keep you healthy and prevent both the spread of infections and disease. But what happens when water and soap are not available? Well, you can use alcohol-based hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol concentration. So for instance, disinfectants and antiseptics have become a daily needs product around the world because of their practicity and the easy but effective way to kill bacteria instantly. But who is going to tell you if the product that you're using is actually working? So first of all, do you know the difference between a disinfectant and an antiseptic? Well, a disinfectant is any substance or process used on non-living objects to kill germs such as viruses, bacteria, and other microorganisms that cause infection and disease. And most disinfectants are harsh chemicals. One example is chloralex. Chloralex is composed of water and sodium hypochlorite. Sodium hypochlorite is a powerful antimicrobial agent. And on the other hand, antiseptics are substances used in living tissues to kill or inhibit the growth of microorganisms. Most antiseptics use the same active chemicals as disinfectants, but in different concentrations. For example, alcohols such as isopropyl and ethyl alcohol in concentrations of 60 to 80% are used as antiseptics. And well, this percentage, when under or over, the effectiveness might be reduced. So the problem arises when commercial products claim to be both, claim to be disinfectants and antiseptics as well. And we're gonna see why. Okay, so the objective of the project was to assess the effectiveness of disinfectants and disinfectants claiming to also be antiseptic across different settings. We use these 4 disinfectants. We test them: chloralex, which contains as active ingredient ethyl alcohol and quaternary ammonium; Family Guard, which contains ammonium saccharinate; Cosmetec, which is a natural base disinfectant. It doesn't contain chemicals. It contains tea tree oil as active antimicrobial ingredient; and citric acid. Also, Zoom product contains ethyl alcohol at 70%. So you can make your bet in which disinfectant is going to be the most effective. Okay, so the research question is how effective is the antimicrobial activity of commercial disinfectants and disinfectants that also claim to be antiseptic? Well, our hypothesis is that because disinfectants use harsh chemicals, they will be more effective than disinfectants that claim to also be antiseptic, because this has less aggressive chemicals fighting against, well, the bacteria, the germs. So the actual project, first of all, we prepare our media. We use nutrient agar along the whole project. We sterilize the media, and then we go to cleaning. We collected the samples, the bacteria samples from a desk, an ID student card, a doorknob, a soap dispenser in the bathroom, and a cell phone. Then we inoculate those samples, and we use a sterile cotton swab. We incubate them for 48 hours at 37 degrees. Then the resulting colonies were isolated and inoculated again in nutrient agar. We incubate them for 48 hours at 37 degrees. Then we follow with the gram staining technique just to classify the bacteria that we got into gram-positive or gram-negative bacteria. And then the fun part, we did the Kirby bias distribution susceptibility test. This test determines the sensitivity or resistance of a pathogen against an antimicrobial compound. So what we did is that we inoculate the bacteria in solid liquid media for easy spread plating. And we with filter paper discs, we impregnated each disinfectant and we let it in the solid culture for 48 hours at 37 degrees. Basically, the presence or the absence of a circle around the disc, it means how effective is the antimicrobial compound used against the pathogen that you are testing. And yeah, we compare the results of the inhibition zone after 24 and 48 hours. These are the results, the beautiful pictures that we got from the gram staining technique. So basically, we got 4 gram-positive bacteria and 1 gram-negative. So gram-positive will stain purple because this bacteria has a thicker layer of peptidoglycan around the cell wall, and the gram-negative will stain pink because of thin layer of peptidoglycan in the cell wall. It is important to mention that gram-negative bacteria are harder to kill because they have this protective outer shell out of the cell membrane, and which gram-positive bacteria, they like this, so they are easier to kill. And basically, these were our results in all the disinfectants. We got the zonal inhibition after 24 hours and 48 hours. In our x-axis, we have the inhibition zone measured in millimeters. And in the y-axis, we have the bacteria found in the different places. The colors represent each disinfectant. And well, the higher the bar, the higher the inhibition zone, which means the higher the antimicrobial activity. So we can see that after 24 hours, chloralex, well, actually it maintains the same inhibition zone almost through the time. So this was the most effective disinfectant among all of them. And followed by family bars, we can see that the only bar that we see in the foam bacteria, which was the gram-negative, the harder to kill, it was SUM. SUM acted as inhibitor after 24 hours, but up to 48 hours, we can see that all disinfectants really work. So, well, the ones that claim to be both disinfectants and antiseptics, we can see that SUM, again, in the x-axis, we have this inhibition zone, and in the y-axis, we have the timeline from 24 hours to 48 hours. Each line represents a bacteria found in the different settings. And we can see the SUM, the one that has ethyl alcohol at 70%, has like decreased efficiency through time, which means that after 48 hours, the bacteria kept growing. So it inhibited at 24, but then the bacteria start growing again. While in the cosmetic products, we see a straight horizontal lines and even a slight increase in the death and burnout bacteria, which means that the bacteria was inhibited very well after 48 hours. Well, you can choose which disinfectant you will use, antiseptic in your hand. It was very interesting that cosmetic, the one that is natural based, it doesn't contain harsh chemicals, acted better than the one in SUM. And this red dot here is the gram-negative bacteria, which means that it did inhibit it, but it took it longer to inhibit the bacteria. So for conclusions, we can say that all the different disinfectants treated bacteria on its way, but it's very important that people, first of all, know the difference between the disinfectants and antiseptics. You cannot use a product that is meant to touch your surfaces or objects or the floor in your hands because, well, you will get irritated or it will be very dangerous. So, yeah, well, the cosmetic product, it was the most promising because it actually serves as a disinfectant. You can use it on surfaces, on objects, and also you can use it in your hands because, well, it doesn't contain harsh chemicals. It doesn't contain alcohol, which may dry out your hands. And well, this project was aimed to inform all the people to choose wisely at the time of buying your products and use them in a right manner. And that be all. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have a question, please reach out. It was just well, we took samples from the doors in the classroom, and then we inoculate them. Like 15. Yes. Yes, they are averages from replicas. Yes, we did replicas for each bacteria found. We did approximately 5 replicas of each, and we tested the 4 disinfectants in each replica. Then we took the average of the inhibition zones, and we made the graph. Well, yeah, well, it wasn't enough replica. We need to get like at least, not even more, like, I don't know, like 50 or 60, and we would just have 40. So the error was, sometimes it was higher, sometimes it was lower, so no.
Hi, Alison, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Very nice presentation, thank you. I have a question. It appeared only the Zoom antiseptic disinfectant work for the phones. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the gram-negative bacteria. So this Zoom product has ethyl alcohol at 70%, which was, I mean, ethyl alcohol should kill bacteria. So it was the only one who inhibited, but only after 24 hours, because up to 48 hours, the other disinfectants start to inhibit these bacteria. Remember that it's harder to kill. So it was interesting results also. Yeah.
Okay, so if I want to disinfect my cell phone, I should use Zoom.
Yeah.
24-hour reaction, right? If I can wait more than 2 days, I can use then the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, the bacteria found in the phone, it was gram-negative, but we can find like gram-positive, gram-negative. It's easier to find gram-positive bacteria like in daily regular spaces or objects that we touch, because gram-negative are like, I don't know, yeah, like more aggressive bacteria. So gram-positive bacteria, we found it in this setting, and the only one that we found was gram-negative. But it doesn't mean that we can find also gram-positive bacteria in our phones.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. Well, it contains citric oil and citric acid. Well, it means that this product, the concentration of this product, commercial product, works better than the product of Zoom. I'm not talking about pure ethanol. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it could be that this product contains less or more concentration, but we need to test it to see how much of ethyl alcohol it does contain. Well, they were impregnated, so they were impregnated. So the Kirby-Bauer susceptibility test is a standardized test. So yeah, yes, and we use disinfectants in spray because of that, because of the practical manners of the experiment. So it will be in liquid, so they will get very well impregnated. No, we actually just like spray. Yeah. No, well, Yeah, but we make sure that all of them were impregnated well. And actually, Master Acosta was there with us supervising all the projects. I mean, that it was, yes, yes. Yeah, that all the dish was with the amount of product enough to make the test. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's why we did replicas to see maybe if there was a. Mhm. Yeah, I understand. I understand, but the essay is like that. It's, it's like that. Sometimes they use it with antibiotics, with paper discs that already have antibiotics. Yes, you already buy it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sugar. Mm-hmm. From the lemon. Yeah. 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 Of course. Yeah. Yes. Of course. Mhm. Yeah. Of course. If you have like sensitive skin, it would be a good option to use the one that has citriol and not ethyl alcohol. For example, I cannot use alcohol in my hands because they dry out like very bad. Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Mhm. Yes. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, gram-positive bacteria could be some strains of E. coli, and gram-negative could be cholera. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, or as we see in Fernanda's presentation, lactobacillus are gram-negative, and staphylococcus are gram-positive. Yes. Mhm. Yes. Yeah, for example, in the bathroom, of course, you're taking out everything that you don't need. So of course you will have like a higher concentration of bacteria, and maybe gram-negative bacteria, maybe because it comes from you. Yeah, I mean that's really anti-hygienic. But and for example, in the kitchen, if you're using chicken, you can spread coliform, but those are another type of bacteria. So yeah, there are different, and we try to test the objects or the surfaces in school because well, the project was made in school, so we can be aware that bacteria is everywhere, and we need to protect ourselves. Yes. Mhm. Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Mhm. Yes, yes. Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you both to our presenters and our judges for being here today. This yet again was our second and almost final day of our second edition of CQ-AState. Please remember that tomorrow we have the poster session. The poster session is going to be, I think, outside the great hall, correct? No? Okay. So it will be out here in front of 800. It will be from 2 to 4. Yet again, judges, please remember to send your grading for the presentations, if possible, today at night. And yes, also please be sure to attend the award ceremony. Tomorrow it's at 4 p.m., finishing the poster session. So thank you so much. Without further ado, I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.